Senator Singh.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I rise tonight to talk about Tony Abbott and the renewable energy target, to remind us what we always knew and what we already know. We know this Conservative Liberal government is actively pursuing a vision returning Australia to the 1950s, the decade in which the only conceivable limit on coal-powered generation was how quickly we could burn it. The decade when no one thought it obsolete or awkward that a man was a minister for women. And the decade when scientific reports cited by a male leader of the government linked abortion with breast cancer. We know Tony Abbott is leading a government of yesterday's men.
Senator Singh, Prime Minister Abbott, if you would. Thank you.
Prime Minister Abbott.
Thank you.
We know Prime Minister Abbott is leading a government of yesterday's men, furiously advocating last century's ideas. We know that Prime Minister Abbott was always going to break the promises he told Greg Hunt to make about the Coalition's commitment to keeping an unchanged renewable energy target. We know the key points about these promises is not their clarity, but their time frame. They were clear promises the Coalition made before the election, and every Australian knows by now the Coalition's attitude to promises it made before the election. We knew that the Prime Minister was planning, when his office established the wrongly described independent review of the RET, instead of taking expert advice from the Climate Change Authority's statute-mandated review of the RET. We knew what the Prime Minister was thinking, even though we knew his thinking was factually incorrect, when he blamed the RET for significant price pressures in the system, an opinion so inaccurate he must have borrowed it from Morris Newman. We knew what the outcome of the RET, of the review of the RET was going to be when Prime Minister handpicked an assortment of fossil fuel boosters and climate change sceptics to sit on the panel, but did not appoint anyone, not anyone, with any industry experience from the renewable energy sector. We knew what recommendations the Prime Minister was demanding from the review when he refused to accept in July and sent it back to do more work to illustrate the abolishing of the renewable energy target. I'll admit that we did not know that the review would recommend the abolishment or crippling of the renewable energy target because, despite its success, there are cheaper ways of abating carbon. For instance, an emissions trading scheme, which, being a market-based system, somehow goes against the Coalition's new DNA. A carbon tax, which has been triumphantly abolished by Tony Abbott, and the purchase of international emissions permits, which Prime Minister Abbott will also not allow. We did not know that the review would describe the fact that the renewable energy target has created thousands of jobs and encouraged billions of dollars of investment as such a problem, because it created too many jobs and encouraged too much investment. We can't remember Dick Warburton ever describing the thousands of jobs created by and billions of dollars invested in the mining boom as a problem. No. And we do know that about 96% of Australia's 3,800 solar PV businesses are small and medium-sized enterprises. And we do know that the solar small business industry took the Prime Minister at his word when he said that he wouldn't axe or slash the renewable energy target. The WA Renewable Energy Alliance has said killing off the subsidies could turn away thousands of customers who would have otherwise been expected to buy their systems. We know that in Australia's renewable energy powerhouse, my home state of Tasmania, the Premier Will Hodgman is worried about the Commonwealth's response to the RET. We know that he should be worried because Hydro Tasmania has warned any winding back of the renewable energy target would threaten their wind farm developments worth $2 billion, while the proponent of a $150 million wind farm at Granville Harbour on the investment-poor west coast of Tasmania has said that both the renewable energy target options placed its project in jeopardy. We know that no Australians will benefit from these options in the Warburton Review report, but that the review's modelling estimates that the big companies operating existing coal-fired power generators will, lo and behold, enjoy financial gains of about $9.1 billion. We know that these profits will come from increased electricity costs for consumers. We know that rather than support innovative 21st century renewable energy technology, the Prime Minister and his government wants our early 20th century fossil fuel infrastructure to extract every tonne of coal and every molecule of gas, despite the fact that the renewable energy target is already driving down Australia's carbon pollution, and despite the fact that nearly 5 million Australians have embraced solar power because it protects their families and small businesses from soaring power bills. And despite the fact that 2 million solar installations had been supported by the renewable energy target as of the 31st of January this year, meaning that 24%, 1/4 of the 8.4 million occupied private dwellings in Australia have a solar system. Despite that fact of abolishing the small-scale renewable energy target would make the installation of solar rooftop panels up to $1,200 more expensive. And also despite the fact that families living on lower incomes are much more likely to install solar than families living in wealthier incomes. And despite the fact that 2/3 of Australians support the renewable energy target in its current form, and that of the 24,000 public submissions to the government's compromised review of the renewable energy target, less than 1/4 of 1% of those submissions favoured reducing the renewable energy target. So, Mr. Acting Deputy President, despite all of that, Prime Minister Tony Abbott wants the renewable energy target dead. We know this. He has been listening too long to Maurice Newman's anti-science and Dick Warburton's anti-science and anti-economics agenda. And I want to remind Prime Minister Tony Abbott's anti-science and anti-environment government of one important point that it is either forgetting or it is completely ignoring in its policy discussion or debate regarding climate and environment policy. And that is that there is no planet B. The Labor Party knows this. We have not forgotten this. And we are not ignoring it. We understand that this is the only planet we have, that it has a finite resource and a finite ability to absorb waste from our exploitation of those resources. Prime Minister Abbott has already shifted the impact of the carbon price from the carbon polluters to the planet, and now he will say nothing about the $14 billion cost or existence of an extra 240 million tonnes of carbon dioxide pollution. Why would he? We know they didn't worry about that sort of thing in the 1950s.